Welcome to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me today, it's my good friend Nate Tice. Nate, how you doing, buddy?
Doing very well. This feels like the first real one, the
It's the
first real
first real one.
Thursday. We
Absolutely.
actually have some film to go off of, some stuff to talk about, some things to react to. It's very, very nice. But no, I'm doing very well. I promise I actually had something to say here outside of just like the little film and just I'm stalling, but I actually did have something when I was taking a shower before the show, but it'll come to me. But I'm doing very well. Can't wait to talk about week 2.
We are going to call this the preview show, just for clarity's sake moving forward. That being said, we're also going to talk about the week that was and all of the stuff that we've watched, even if it isn't necessarily attached to a game we're going to be watching this weekend. So the way that we're going to start these preview shows, this being week 2, is we're going to talk about whatever the big story is that we've been marinating on over the last few days, the one that's just kind of been sitting there as we've been going back and revisiting whatever the week that was in the NFL happened to be like. This week, it feels like we should dig into how awful I did and how not great you did in our 10-team wins pool that we're doing, because I think that points to the larger disappointments from the most elite teams in the NFL from week 1. So we each picked 5 teams before the season. For people who do not know, combined wins, the loser has to pay off a bet during Super Bowl week that we have not made public, but is not going to be fun. I went 2-3, and we got to pick the 5 best teams that we wanted. I went 2-3. You went 3-2, right? Or 4-1?
4-1. Which
you went 4-1.
I think is pretty great. Except the one was very notable in that it was the Chiefs. It
was the first team you picked.
Yes, number 2 overall for my first overall.
I would say 3 of the 4 top picks in that draft, or 3 of the 4 teams I think there were the consensus best teams coming into the NFL this season, were the Chiefs, the Bengals, and the Bills. All 3 of those teams lost in week 1. Okay. If you look a little bit deeper at the numbers on an EPA per play basis for dropbacks, this was the lowest EPA per play or EPA per dropback number in a single week since 2000. That's how much defense has dominated for the first week of the NFL season. So I just wanted to take a slight step back and ask some bigger picture questions about the week that we saw and some of those elite teams that we saw underperform or struggle a little bit. How real is this? And how much of this do we think is just a week 1 blip where there's going to be a bounce back from these teams and just league wide?
I think it's a little bit real, but it's a lot of it week 1 blip, and also the circumstances some of these best offenses were in, or offenses or that we overall expect a lot of this season. There's still the Dolphins performance, the Chargers. There's some notable performances in week 1. Notably, those 2 are against each other. Yeah. The Jags, the 49ers, there's some really good ones, but I think
even the Jags were like 24th in the NFL in EPA per dropback last week because they're turnovers. So even some of those numbers are way down even more from teams that we would have said were actually pretty impressive in week 1.
And then there's weather, and I felt like every team felt dreary, very very detective film noir-y, like just every single game we watched, but also just the best, think of the best offenses that we have. Burrow's coming off a calf injury. Josh Allen, well, we'll talk about that. Josh Allen had his sporadic moments, and the Bills offense had their sporadic moments in a wonky Monday night game. Patrick Mahomes without Travis Kelce. Those are 3 of the offenses that I think a lot of people would have up there in their top 5, top 6 in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, the ones that we're expecting most out of had big letdowns, it felt like, on a national stage. So I feel like that's kind of doing a lot of weight right now, but I think there are ways to explain away some of those issues.
The Bengals, Joe Burrow has dead last in EPA per dropback in week 1. I don't think that will continue. Even if there are some things to worry about, I don't think that's going to be the case all the way through the season. Like you said, weather games. I also feel like the lack of participation in the preseason and what practice times have looked like, I think there's probably a correlation with some early season offensive slumps. And I do think that we're going to see these teams bounce back. Like we've said a million times before, when you get out of the first 4 games of the season, which is essentially just an extended preseason right now, I do think we're going to see the realer versions of what these teams actually are.
And what teams adjust to and how they figure out their personnel. And that's the thing, is usually the cream rises to the crop, especially with the seasons are a week longer now. There's kind of that get a little more buffer. I would say, I hate to say that, you don't want to throw any week away or anything like that, but you do get a little bit more buffer with that added week in the NFL season and an added playoff spot on each side as well. But I do think it's just, there's ways to explain away what happened. And a lot of these top offenses that we expect a lot of, I think are going to recover in nice ways, maybe even this week.
We're going to talk about the Bengals a little bit later on the show, but I want
Yeah.
to ask you about the two other teams. How worried are you about the Chiefs? And after you went back and watched that game and their offensive line, we discussed a little bit, their receivers, how worried are you actually about the Chiefs pass catching group?
The pass catching group, I am actually a little bit more worried, but they are getting Travis Kelce back, and you got to realize how much a safety blanket that is for Mahomes. All the big plays, but just all the, ad lib plays that those two have. That let's be honest, that offense is built around their mind meld. And I also just want to say,
I went back and watched the first couple drives of that Jacksonville playoff game, and oh boy, is that true?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Boy,
Yeah.
is that true?
That game especially. But also want to give it a little, our Thursday live show after that game against the Lions. I kind of was like, oh, there's some question marks with Juwan Taylor and the offensive tackles. Juwan Taylor actually played a very good game against Aiden Hutchinson and just had one or two bad plays that probably did a lot of weight in my brain, probably a lot of other people's. But they actually felt a lot better about the offensive line. I think they could have pounded the rock a little bit more. We'll figure that out. And I think just having Travis Kelce back will just be such a breath of fresh air for this team.
How about the Bills? Are you worried at all about the Bills?
Yes and no. I'm not as worried about Josh Allen, I think, as other people are. I think you just got to own this. I think we'll talk about this in a sec. But I'm a little bit with the Bills, kind of like I thought they would lean into other things a bit more. Like they only had like 4 or 5 under center plays. They really did the whole 12 personnel. And they're like, we're doing this, baby, like 2/3 of the snaps. But it kind of just felt like more of the same. I thought they would have a little more different stuff there, a little different flavoring. So I hope they figure out. I do like what Ken Dorsey does for the most part. And I do really trust Josh Allen in a weird way. I can't believe I just said that, but I do. Because just as highs.
He's been the second best quarterback in the NFL over the last several seasons.
Yes.
It is reasonable to trust Josh Allen in the long term.
And
after that game on Monday, I am a little concerned. Okay.
I get it.
Going from what he was in the back half of last season and how frantic it all felt, I would encourage people that are trying to understand why I feel this way to go back and listen to our Bills preview coming into the season. And the amount of time and energy we spent discussing the elements of their offseason plan that were designed to slow down his heart rate.
Right.
More stoutness in the interior of the pocket, a middle of the field pass catcher, and just players and elements in that area that would allow for some quicker, easier completions. All of that stuff felt like it was designed to just have this entire team take a deep breath. And then you watch that game and he's going insane it seems like every single drop back, he clicks into frantic mode immediately. And that being the note on which we're starting the season, even if it was against the Jets defense, I'm a tiny bit concerned that it was an immediate continuation of what we saw from them at their worst at the end of last year.
I thought some of what Ken Dorsey did is just, I'm a little disappointed in kind of enabling Josh Allen and not like just pulling the lever of going like pumping the brakes, getting under center, pounding the rock. They only did 3 times. They only ran the ball 3 times from under center, which is, I thought was going to be like more like 10 times maybe, just to get those 3-4 easy yards, hopefully just those positive plays and those plays that, okay, we can take a deep breath as a team. And that's kind of what disappointed me more than anything. I can explain away 2 of the interceptions. I also think one of them, the third down arm punt, was one that it's pretty disappointing for him to do that. But the other 2, I don't know, Gabe Davis like ran a really shit route on that third interception. But this is what Josh Allen is. And I trust him over the course of the season. Against most teams, he is going to keep this Bills team in every game because of the highs that he brings. You just have to take the lows when it comes. It's just, that's what he is. He's a maniac. And I think that there's going to be times that they push different buttons at a little better, more efficient equation as a team. But I just think that was just against a Jets defense that just like has their number right now, especially with that defensive front.
They're not going to play against the Jets defense every single week. I understand that. But for him to look so uncomfortable and so frantic in the pocket almost immediately on a huge portion of those snaps, the interceptions aside, even if you want to explain away a couple of those decisions, just the overall feeling of watching him in that game and how erratic it felt almost from the start, that is worrying to me. They are so good when he just kind of takes a small, deep breath and the dials turn where it's 52% of that guy rather than 78% of that guy. And that's what I'm concerned about. I just want them to settle back at a level where the playmaking and his ability to kind of create things out of structure becomes a strength and not their undoing. That's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah. And I think they're passing game wise that they have to, I don't think he's dumb or anything, but they do have to simplify it so he gets comfortable. I think his best passing season, most calm passing seasons, was when he had that Cole Beasley easy button and the Stephon Diggs stuff going on. And I think, yes, they still have Diggs. They need to find that way where it's just 6 calm yards. That's what this offense needs. It just needs some calm seas. And that's really it, because like the results end up being okay outside the turnovers. Like they have some sustainable underlying numbers. And Josh Allen, when he does have those calm moments, is just firing BBs everywhere. And it's like impossible to guard because of the windows he can hit and the plays he can create. Like even outside his scrambles, they were very like efficient just passing the ball. And the run game actually wasn't that bad, like as far as just underlying numbers. But it's just
I like some of the stuff that they were doing out of the gun run game. Some of those quicker hitters where they were getting the ball to Cook on the perimeter because the Jets defensive line gets upfield so quickly. I liked some of the ideas, but again, just felt so unsettled in a way that is scarring just because of how it felt for stretches last year. That's it.
It's incomplete. The chemistry of it all is incomplete to me. And I just thought that I am with you that I think that week 1, I thought they were going to see some real, just some growth. And some of the concerns I saw in the preseason where it was like felt more of the same. I felt like that again. And I think there is highs to this, but it was a little bit disappointing. I am still going to bet that they figure it out, but I do think there's going to be some growing pains. I do think they get a nice little get right game maybe this week to kind of maybe figure it all out.
I say all this. He throws for 400 and rushes for 80 and has 5 total touchdowns this weekend, which is totally on the table. It always is. He's one of the best players in the league. In the non-Mahomes tier, he'd be the first guy I'd start a team with. But that start to the season, after everything we talked about this summer, it just worries me. And it's going to worry me until they show that they can, again, kind of take a deep breath and slow that heart rate down. Let's stick on kind of post-week 1 thoughts here. In the 2 weeks before the season started, we talked about, or the 3 weeks, 4 weeks, the month before the season started, we talked about every team. Okay. We had 2 shows where we're throwing out a bunch of predictions. We had so many takes on the table from August 1st until September 1st. After 1 week, I wanted us to revisit just a few of those, specifically the ones that you already feel the worst about. So are there a couple of your preseason takes that you're already feeling like you maybe were a little bit quick jumping the gun a little bit?
I would say the Chargers not being a top 10 offense, especially just watching the growth of that run game. We'll see if health sticks, but I think this offensive line looks pretty damn good. This offense looks very sustainable. Yes, we'll see how many explosive plays they can get, but I don't know. I just think it's a very sustainable offense with a very, very good quarterback and enough weapons to kind of keep this thing going. We'll see if Eckler stays healthy as well. But
didn't seem to matter. Josh Kelly was a monster on Sunday.
Holy crap. But that just their ground game looked so good. Like so good. Of course, just under just the stats too, but it just looked good by eye test. But I think they'll figure out the passing game, or at least to be efficient enough. Yes, they still have some question marks, but man, I don't know. I just think over 17 weeks, this offense, as long as this offensive line stays healthy, this offense could be way up there.
And I'm sure people are going to say, well, the Dolphins defense and the light boxes, and you should be able to run the ball against those teams. They couldn't last year.
No,
that was the problem. Even when teams were giving them advantageous looks, they couldn't do it. So having one data point this season where teams are allowing them to run it and they're gashing a defense for one of the most efficient running games we've seen in the last decade, that is a step in the right direction. It didn't matter if they're playing with 4 guys in the box. Right. I don't care what the pre-snap looks looked like. So if a team does spend a little bit more time, energy, focus on slowing down the running game, can they start throwing it all over the yard again? Right. So this is a very good start when we think about the overall ecosystem that we wanted the Chargers offense to live in.
One last thing I thought was cool was Kellen Moore was giving Herbert the DAC license. He was really letting him operate at the line of scrimmage, which I think is really cool to see the next step in Herbert's game. Herbert, seems extremely mentally sharp. And I've always been enamored with his processing because his eyes would always go to the perfect spot and be like, you didn't even glance over there. Like, how are you getting over there? It never made sense to me. So it's cool to see him getting kind of a little bit more sheriff to him. And, he's in a Subway ad now. So we're seeing that Herbert's letting it all hang out now. So I'm excited to see this this season and see just where that goes to and what that can get to.
My first one is also top 10 offense related. I did not pick the Dolphins to be one of the top 10 offenses in the league this year. It was often injury related when we were talking about the reasons they might not finish in the top 10. Teron Armstead, Tua staying healthy throughout the season. Well, we're one game in. Teron Armstead didn't play, and they threw for 450 yards. And as long as Tua is on the field, I should have given more credit to what the 2.0 version of this offense was going to look like with Mike McDaniel. Down the stretch last year, defenses had a very good plan for them. And when they were forced to play not on time and a little bit out of rhythm, that offense didn't look the same throwing the football. Tua's ability to make off-schedule plays in that game and whatever the wrinkles that Mike McDaniel was throwing out. We talked about a ton of them on the Sunday night show, the different ways they were using motion, etc. I should have had more faith in the guy who every single offensive coach in the NFL this summer told me they were stealing from heading into this season, that he was maybe going to come with a new set of ideas that was going to make it challenging on the defenses they were playing against. That's on me.
And he already showed another layer right away. That's like, oh, that's simple but effective and genius. Like, and again, we listen to Sunday Night Recap if you haven't, because it's amazing to see kind of just like what such a simple twist can do. So honestly, he showed it a little bit last season, trying to evolve already in the middle of the season. And that's like, oh, what if he has 6 months to do it and 8 months to do it and actually understands his personnel even better? Yeah, I'm pretty disappointed I didn't have them up there either. But again, it was health related. That was always the thing.
And it's week one. Over the course of the season, we'll see what happens. But when you start like that, it already is making me feel a little bit uneasy.
I can't wait to talk about that game later. Spoilers.
What's your next one?
My next one
that you didn't feel that you don't feel as good about now as you did a month ago.
And this is nothing against the guy, but the Bijan Robinson offensive rookie year being a shoe-in chalk. Yeah, I'm not feeling as good. And it's not really, there might be some usage stuff with how they use Algier and everything, but it's more about what other guys did, as specifically one person, Anthony Richardson with the Colts. And that's why I'm not feeling so good, because I want to say a lot of hot takes after I watch Anthony Richardson's first game, like
take it easy over there.
Scorchers.
You said some stuff in our production meeting that I don't want to put you on blast about.
I know. I don't want to be on air on him. I don't want to be on record yet about it. But what Anthony Richardson's showing right now, you can't be more promising. That he's already answering question marks that he had as a prospect, and he's just his processing, his arm talent, his ability to just do everything. Throwing check downs, like keeping his eyes downfield, hitting seam routes, just everything, running the ball. It's amazing. I love watching him. I cannot wait to continue to watch him this year.
We spent a lot of time talking about that game with Chase Daniel and In the Pocket yesterday. If you guys have not checked that out, I felt the same way. I just couldn't be, if I were a Colts fan, I've said this a couple different times in a couple different places, I couldn't be more excited about the way that he played. The talent is so undeniable. And I'm not talking about the physical gifts and the way that he moves and the height, weight, speed stuff. There were a couple plays where he's pulling it and getting around the edge at 260 in a way that's like, oh my God. But it wasn't that. The thing physically that jumped out the most is just how the ball comes out of his hand and how easy of a thrower he is. He just has really, really high-end arm talent. And we saw that immediately. Just the ball explodes off his arm. But the other stuff, the playing on time, how fast he was playing, how assertive the decision-making was, just never felt like he was uncomfortable or out of place in his first NFL game after starting 13 games in college. The entire concern about this guy was rawness. It was about how far he had to go. It was about inexperience. So we thought that there might be some high highs and some low lows. But the process of it all on Sunday leads me to believe that it might be a little steadier throughout the season with just some peaks than what we maybe thought coming into the year.
The floor is way higher. Right
that
away.
Is a good
That's
way
what
to say
it. The floor is just so much higher to start out. And of course, we know what the ceiling can be, but if we see it that year, who knows? But he's going to be a human highlight reel. I mean, he makes screen passes look exciting. Like he has like a little bit of like Stafford to him, with his like kind of how he changes arm angles and stuff. It's crazy what he does. Just the underneath, also just real quick, just the one of the big question marks with him, of course, was accuracy. And he had he had one spray miss at least that was kind of like, oh, there it is. But he also just underneath.
He was pretty juiced up in that game. I mean, the ball.
It was his first real throw. That's the one I'm thinking of. It was about 10 yards over the corner's head, or the quarter route's head. But his ability to just hit all the underneath stuff. All those, if they did RPOs, the bubbles, replacing blitzes, like with pressure in his face and changing the arm angle, and also understanding where all that comes from. It was a lot of mature. I knew he was pretty mature even without the starts, but like just from what I've heard about him and seen him in interviews. But man, it was just a lot more football IQ that even higher to start out than I ever thought it could be. It was pretty cool. I didn't see many wrong decisions as a passer, which is, I think, more like super remarkable for his first start. Jaguars defense isn't like elite, but still it was a good first start for them.
Yeah, I could not have been more impressed, and I'm very, very excited to see where things go from here. Again, he just seemed like he was not out of place. He never seemed like he was out of place the entire first game. Even if the Jags defense isn't elite, it's not a terrible unit. I was incredibly impressed. My last one here, I am so mad at myself for not being more committed to the Browns being good this year. Yeah. I am so pissed at myself. If you go back and listen to the section where we picked playoff teams in our main prediction show, I said them as like one of the 3 teams at the end where, they absolutely could make it instead of the Jets. And I just threw them in there. I'm mad that I wasn't more committed to it. I picked them as a top 10 offense coming into the season. I just felt like they were a top 10 offense last year. I have so much faith in Stefanski and the design of that entire thing. And even if it wasn't a great performance in week 1, notably from the quarterback in some moments, I still felt like the plan offensively hasn't pushed me off that whatsoever. And the way the defense played and the ceiling the defense had with the level of talent, if it all came together under Jim Schwartz, we already have seen it for 1 week. So I'm a little bit disappointed in myself that I just didn't have the courage to pick them to make the playoffs because I wish I had.
Yeah, especially the defense. I wish I pulled the trigger on it. It was I loved everything. I'm telling, like I keep repeating this, but free agency, draft, Schwartz, just boom, boom, boom. The plan made sense. The pickups in the summer, Zadarius Smith. It was like, oh, Shelby Harris. It was like,
the Shelby Harris moment watching the game on Sunday when he had just a pretty impressive run stop at a certain point. I was like, oh shit, that's right. Shelby Harris is like the 3rd defensive tackle on this team now compared to what they were doing last year.
And they invest in the draft, and then the offense. I figured there'd be some unevenness as they figure out their chemistry. That's what I think. That's a lot of things too. Maybe some early offensive struggles is got some of that kind of going on. Okay, we got a new quarterback in a new spot. We got young quarterbacks all over the place as well. I know that's every year, but it's notable. Tom Brady ain't here. He ain't walking through that door. We don't think. But it's also like watching the Browns offense. They had like kind of an 8-minute stretch where it's like you could see a light bulb kind of go on. Like they're okay, this is kind of how we have to do this all. They're toying with some things. I talked about this on the Sunday show, but with their play action stuff. So I'm right there with you. I wish I pulled the trigger on it because I liked a lot of the moves they made, and I could see their path this year.
All right, let's talk about a couple things that happened in week 1 that were notable that might be a little bit of a mirage, and I'm wondering if you're buying some of this stuff. So let's start with a game that you broke down on Wind the Clock, and it's been a topic of conversation on multiple shows on this feed this week, and that is the performance that we saw from the Los Angeles Rams and Matthew Stafford. Are you buying that this Rams team can be relevant in the NFC this year?
I love how you frame it because, yes, they can be relevant, which in the NFC means win 9 games. I think it's a race to 9.
They're
right?
over under 6.5. So if they're in that 9-10 win range and they're above 500, that is significantly better than Vegas expected them to be this season.
Correct. Well, I think we all there's a lapse of where people just forgot. Oh yeah, Matthew Stafford. Oh yeah, and even without Cooper Kupp, how great this offense looked. The run game, like if you just look at it, you're like, oh man, they didn't really do much. What they're toying with in the run game is super promising. And I wrote about it in my article this week, but you can see this all coming together. The offensive line makes sense. Joe Newbom's at right guard. They have their best 5 out there. And they kind of just made that a real thing. I was a little bit concerned
about all of that in the preseason. When we saw Noteboom move into guard and Coleman Shelton was going to play center and Brian Allen wasn't starting anymore. And Alaric Jackson, who they got off the street, is their starting left tackle now.
Their left tackle and their center, they swapped out. That's usually like, woo, woo.
When I saw all that, I was like, oh man, that's a little bit concerning. Like they paid Noteboom all this money. And part of this, I think, is just the lack of talent on the Seahawks defensive front and them not being a strength. But I was still impressed by what I saw from the Rams offensive line. Steve Avila played really well in his first career start. It was a 2nd-round pick. So if that group can be competent and healthy,
Yep.
Matthew Stafford can still sling the shit out of the ball, man.
If you watch the play I broke down, that third down play, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ball out, and they're throwing it 30 something yards down the field because the protection's good enough. And on top of it, Kyron Williams, who had a couple touchdowns, he's fantastic in protection. That's what he was known for at Notre Dame. And like, so that's his thing. But so he's helping like block it up. They have a little more juice in the run game. And yeah, it's just some stuff and so when Cooper Kupp comes in a couple of weeks, hopefully they figure out this hamstring thing. Maybe you got a stew going. Yeah. I mean, they're using Tutu Atwell in a great way, I think, like just keeping him vertical. I'm avoiding talking about the defense, if you notice. So it's also they got Puka Nacua.
This is where I would throw cold
role.
water on this, is how good is the defense going to be over the course of the season? Bryant
Hopefully
Young.
feisty.
Bryant Young, it's Bryant
Byron,
Young, right?
Byron, B-Y-R-O-N, I think.
Byron Young. I keep getting this wrong, and he's like a high draft pick that played very well. I should know his name. He was very impressive. Again, I thought the attitude from the secondary, I like the way that group played. So I do think the defense might not be an absolute dumpster fire, but it's still young and unproven to the point where I might pump the brakes a little bit on this being a potential playoff team in the NFC.
They're going to be, I think, the real good teams. I can't remember exactly their schedule, but the like good teams are going to kind of, patter them away. They might kind of get feisty with them, but I do think they will take advantage of some bad defenses, and that there are some bad ones in the NFC. So I think that's just, they're going to win the games that they should win. And I think that can keep you relevant in this NFC race. And Aaron Donald, you forget about Aaron Donald, freaking just terrifying offenses. He's pretty good. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, that guy. So that can make a lot of defenses workable at least.
I don't think it makes sense for their current timeline, and for the first time in forever, they have draft capital, so I can't imagine them doing this. But when I think about the construction of the team, this is a team that I would love to see Jonathan Taylor on. I don't think it will ever happen for many different reasons, but Kyron Williams being allowed to just do what Kyron Williams does rather than being a 4-6 guy who runs a 4-6 as an early down back, and you drop Jonathan Taylor into this equation, I would feel pretty good about it. That's like the one team I'm like, ooh, I actually like that, even if I don't think there's ever a world where it would happen.
I hinted at it, but this is the last point, is that Sean McVay and that offensive coaching staff with the Rams, they're doing some really cool stuff right now, like run game and pass game. So like keep an eye on it, because there might see a lot of tweets from me about like the Rams, just interesting 4-yard gains that they do on first and second down the run game.
I know I can count on you for that, buddy.
Oh yeah, buddy.
Next one here. Are you buying that Jordan Love is already a top half of the league quarterback after that performance last week?
I would say yes. And I would say at the end of the season, I would say it would be more firmly yes. And I'm glad I watched it, because it was, did you notice that Matt LaFleur like made sure to say like Jordan Love ran 100% of the offense as called? Did you see that quote? So so
no, but I'm not surprised by that quote.
Yeah, I think he likes Jordan Love as his trigger man. Of course, one caveat: Bears defense is not going to be good. So you have
I have several caveats, by the way. There's a bunch of different caveats. I was impressed by Jordan Love. Yeah. I thought that every aspect, we talked about this a little bit with Chase yesterday. There were so many aspects of his play where it was what you'd want to see. Everything was on time. His eyes were going to the right place. He seemed very comfortable within the offense. That being said, a huge chunk of that offensive production was a throwback screen, a leak play, an angle route out of the backfield. They had another touchdown to Luke Musgrave that they didn't hit down the left sideline. He sprayed probably 3 or 4 throws. He is going to be just fine in piloting this thing, because the talent that they have across the board, especially up front, and the talent of their offensive play caller is such where this is going to be a pain in the ass for defenses to deal with. But I'm not going to throw him that high that quickly based on last week's performance. That's what I would say.
I think he has, like, if we keep saying he's running the offense, so like he went to the right spot just basically every time that I could see. It's going to feel a little different than old Packers offenses. Obviously, when you lose Aaron Rodgers, it's not going to be as quick hitty. They're just going to use the run game. That's the run game. They don't have Devontae Adams out there. So they tried a little bubble, like one-man bubble to Dobbs, and it went for like 1 yard. It was pretty funny. I was like, yeah,
we'll see what happens when Christian Watson gets back. They didn't have their most explosive pass catcher in this game, which will help.
But he makes some high difficulty throws. That first touchdown throw is pretty sweet. He double clutches it, but I mean that in a good way, like kind of like resets and throws it. And there was a missile on a dig route. He was hitting way more in breaking routes he had like, which I think is like, that's the big thing that he's going to do, because this run game's going to be so good. The O-line's good, very good. I think a top 5 unit. And I think the big difference with him, though, is he's attacking over the middle. So it's not just going to be go balls and fades and short stuff. Like, he's getting those kind of singles and doubles. And I think that willingness to attack over the middle, it showed up in the stats. I was like, man, he's hitting a lot of in breakers today. So he hit 30%, nearly 30% of his pass attempts between the numbers. Okay, 6 to 15 yards between the numbers, or 6 to 20 yards between the numbers, that little area there. Rodgers only cleared that number once since 2020. That's all it is right there. It's all in structure. It's all everything they want to do. The high lows, he's hitting the highs. And I think that's why he's going to look really good, even if he does have some bad misses, because he's going to hit those high difficulty throws that Rodgers kind of went away from over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I was impressed with him. I don't know how much of it is him and how much of it is the offense. I don't know how much of it matters, because I think the combination of the two is going to be pretty darn good over the course of the year.
The 4 is really good.
And
that's also
they're so young.
Yeah.
And so this is all house money. This is not the Packers' year. I think they can win 10 games. I think they can be a playoff team. And this next year is the year where this is all supposed to come together. So whatever level they reach is a bonus at this point. And I'm already bullish on what that's going to look like. The offensive line looks so good, by the way. And I know the Bears defensive line might be the worst pass rushing unit in the entire NFL, which we're going to touch on here in a second. But I thought the offensive line looked crisp, cohesive, as so many lines around the league struggled in week 1 in combination blocks, passing off stunts, all those things that take time and time together. And maybe a little bit deeper into the season is when you see it all come together. I thought the Packers were really sharp in those areas from the start. It was pretty impressive to watch.
They invest in it. And they have depth and continuity and versatility.
They barely invest in it, man. They throw all these 4th round picks at random dudes, and then they end up being plus starters immediately. So the Jordan Love thing is frustrating for Bears fans. The Zach Tom thing is even more frustrating for me.
I think
they're just finding 4th round right tackles in their back pocket every single year is just infuriating to me.
Their whole offense, just day 2 and day 3 picks, outside of Love. But it's, their offense line is 4th rounder, 2nd rounder, 6th rounder, 4th rounder. The backups are 7th rounder, 4th rounder, 3rd rounder, undrafted free agent. They find these guys, they invest, and you have to have that continuity if you want a line like this, and they have one.
Last one. And I really have hesitated to talk about this, but it's time.
Okay.
Are you buying that the dream of this Bears season, where the offense takes a big step forward and this team is relevant, is already dead after 1 week? Because if you look on the internet right now, a lot of people believe that it's already dead.
But I think I have to say yes to that, because I do buy that it's pretty doom and gloom right now. But I also don't think it's as bad as it maybe some people make it out to be. I think the big thing we have to get to, I think we both agree on this, is what, like we talked about our NFC North preview with this team. It's not, I don't know where these high expectations for this team came from.
There were a lot of high expectations, not even high expectations. A lot of people they were Justin Fields MVP bets because of the odds. That was something that was happening pretty often. So a lot of MVP tickets. And I think people just expected the offense to take a substantial step forward after going out and getting DJ Moore and after investing in the offensive line. And what I watched on Sunday was not a substantial step forward. So I'm wondering if you think that that's indicative of what is to come, or if you think that this was kind of a week 1 bit of messiness from the Bears offense.
I think it's a week 1 bit of messiness. So it's a no, I guess. Is it not as bad as maybe some people think? I think first things first, this will be good. I'll have a good and bad here. I promise. It's not always glass half full with Nate Tice. So it's the normal neutral kind of plays. Like for this Bears team, they had like some good stuff. Like they were moving the ball. The Justin Fields check down thing, that yes, there was a couple throws I wish he pulled the trigger on, but it's progress for him that he's hitting a freaking check down as opposed to running around and getting sacked for 15 yards. So it's like, okay, that is some good. On 1st and 2nd down, this team was 6th in success rate in week 1. Like they had some stuff on week 1. That's outside 2 minutes. So you can't even blame that, like when they're trying to catch up and everything. But I think the players also messing up were the bad players. Chase Claypool, the fullback, who had a couple real bad ones. He's getting onto Mustafer list, like where I'm just like, I gotta learn your name because it's not in a good way. The backup receivers missing a block. But so the bad though was it seemed like outside of the staple plays for this offense, they tried to do way too much. I felt like they tried to do a little bit of everything, different personnels, different looks, and the situational stuff, usually which is week to week, was sloppy. And I think that was very apparent to anyone that's been on social media or watched the game on Sunday.
The red zone
But
stuff was grotesque.
it was
It
very
was
sloppy.
so bad. Everything in the red zone was so bad. The JT O'Sullivan's done a pretty substantial job pointing this out, but the sprint option stuff in the red zone and cutting off half the field every single time they were down there, it's a non-starter. That's the shit never works. And so that part of it combined with just the lack of detail across the board, that's what was most concerning to me. We can get to Fields in a second, but when you're going to live and die by 1,000 screen passes and be so horizontal, that needs to be precise to be the engine of your offense. And it wasn't precise at all. That we talk about the cohesion that we saw from the Packers offensive line. The Bears offensive line felt the opposite. And I understand that, right? You have a rookie right tackle. You have a right guard that didn't practice all of training camp for reasons that are still unclear. And then like 2 weeks ago, your starting center breaks his hand. Your starting left guard gets hurt. So now your starting center is your starting left guard. So I can get why it wouldn't look great. But then you have just miscues from Braxton Jones on that bad Devontae Wyatt sack. You have just everything about the run game and things that needed to be finely tuned within the offense didn't feel finely tuned. It felt very, very sloppy. And then you combine that with still concerns about the quarterback and how fast he plays the game, period. Like all the stuff that we talked about coming into the season, even if there were some moments that were a little bit better, all those underlying concerns that I had about how fast things are happening back there last week did not make me feel much better about those issues.
And it's probably, as long as the offensive line, especially the interior, it's hard to see a path where you're going to see like the real true leaps forward that we want to see. It's just that you got to take the small good things, but also just little tweaks that I want to see. And this is like such a minor thing, but I think anyone that watches Fields and see how elongated he is with everything, just every drop back is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm kind of trying to be funny here, but this is also a real story. Is in college when I played with Russell Wilson. I don't know if you guys know this, but Russell Wilson's 6 inches shorter than me. And I'm a very tall human being. We would like Paul Chris would teach dropbacks a little bit different timing for both of us. So if it were a 7-step or a 5-step drop from the gun, he would say, Russ, take 5 because he's a very good athlete. And Nate, you're not. So you take just 3 out of the gun. So just little tweaks like that, I was hoping to see like improvement on. And it was like, oh, okay, we're doing that again. But the fact that they're doing long dropbacks with him, and I do think he is finding an okay answer, is improvement. It's just that is sustainable. Finding those checkdowns is much more sustainable than him running around and juking 20 guys and taking 15-yard losses, because you see what happens at the end of the game when that happens. So that's why I just do see some positivity from it, but it is just concerning to see the sloppiness. And that's just a reminder that this team is so far away from having competency because they just don't have a lot of players and they're trying to do a lot of shit right now.
Shouldn't they have players at this point? They have DJ Moore. They traded the 32nd pick for Chase Claypool. They've spent all this money and all these resources along the offensive line. Like, I don't think that they're good by any means, but they should be functional based on the resources that they've pumped into some of these units. Is that not fair?
I think it's fair. I think they should have pumped more into the offensive line, especially the interior. Like, I don't know. I just thought, Nate Davis was fine. I thought they're like, I don't know. I thought they needed one more piece there. So I thought that was pretty concerning, especially how this offseason went. It's like, no, we got to get linebackers. It's kind of like, do you?
We can definitely have a conversation at some point about the misallocation of all of the resources.
I still think the DJ Moore edition was like, I really like that because it was just like, okay, this guy's good. Like, he is good. But like,
with not many pathways to find a receiver of that caliber.
No, because you need so much along the lines that you don't want to invest in a receiver when you need so much along the lines. That's how you get a guy like that. And so I like moves like that. But then you remember the Claypool stuff, and he's already just off the team, it seems like. And so
I can't even start with that. Well, it's the most frustrated I have been watching a player on tape on any team, and I can't even remember how long. The effort as a blocker in that game is just unbelievably bad. And Eberflus has talked about it this week, and he's discussed, like, we've talked with him about that. You can't be this CEO hits high intensity principle guy where everyone's going to play with a certain hustle and vibe and allow that to happen. Period. Like what is this team supposed to be if that's the sort of effort you're going to get when everything that you've talked about since the moment you got here is trying to get guys to play a certain way?
I'm going to let marinate a little longer, but I'm not ready to commit on any direction on like how Eberflus is until I see a few more weeks this season. I just can't.
I'm not either, but that's a troubling thing to see when that's supposed to be your calling card as an organization and as a coach.
And also just, no, that's it.
Yeah, the DJ Moore edition, go get DJ Moore. Like that's good. That's great. He got 2 targets on Sunday.
Yeah.
they threw him the ball 2 times.
I know. It's that is that kind of annoying. Well, one more positive Fields thing. When he was pressured, he actually did okay. He was 8th and pressured, right? Successor while pressured. It's just like there's small signs that's like, okay, we know what he can do with his legs. That's a weapon. But it was like, let's see if as long as he's sustainable as a passer. So that's why you got to take the little positive things, at least with this offense. Until we see it in a month and there's no growth, like real growth, then I'll like join you. But like right now, I'm just kind of like,
it's just so frustrating. And I compare that with what I saw from Anthony Richardson on Sunday. And you watch Anthony Richardson when the pocket gets muddy and just how calmly and deftly he was maneuvering that space.
That would make me angry too.
And then you see Justin Fields and it's just like, man, it just,
I know.
That's what it looks like. That's what I'm hoping it looks like when things start to get crowded in there. Just, it's not about, I can't remember exactly what play it was, but there was one where there was a little bit of pressure. And instead of just sliding in the pocket, he immediately pulls the ball down and starts to run. And that's the play that he fumbled on. It's like, that doesn't need to happen. It doesn't need to be to live in both extremes here where you're either scrambling all around or it's a clean pocket. Like those don't need to be the only 2 worlds here. And to see that from other quarterbacks and see them navigate that in a way that he can't at this point, that's a little bit frustrating. That's all I will say.
I get it.
All right. Let's talk about week 2 and let's get into some of these games from week 2. We have 2 games of the week that we're going to break down here. Let's start with the Ravens at the Bengals. One of the biggest mysteries that we had coming into this season was what this Ravens offense was going to look like under Todd Monken. I am curious, after going back and rewatching it this week, your first initial impressions of the Todd Monken-led Ravens offense.
It's certainly creative. I will say that. Just a lot of formations, spread passing game, I formation stuff. It was everything you could think of. It was a truly greatest hits with Lamar covering the greatest hits. And if that kind of makes sense, they also gave a lot of ownership to Lamar. Like you can see him controlling at the line of scrimmage. They had package plays that looked very elongated as far as the play call. I could tell how long the huddle took and also just the pre-snap process, but that's good. I think that's a really good thing to see, but they're running everything. And I think I looked at, kind of box score. I had that channel. I didn't have that channel up or that game on, like just to focus on. So I rewatched it and watching it all 22. The all 22 I liked a lot more than I thought my initial take would be. And I think I'm very encouraged. And dude, Monken was channeling his like inner Mike Martz. And I mean that in a good way. Like he's like attacking 15 yards, 20 yards down the field using 5-man protection, but not in like a, tacky way, like actually kind of like, okay, with some class. And it was really nice. Like, they're putting some heat on, I think they're going to have a lot of heat on defenses. And now they're getting Mark Andrews back this week. So I was encouraged, even if it wasn't like the, cement. Oh yeah, this was a big first step. I thought it was a good, solid one. And I think even with some injury woes, I think there's some encouraging signs with what they have.
Structurally, it's about as far removed as we thought it was going to be. I've seen some people throw out a number this week that they were in 11 personnel on 44% of their snaps, which was like a 4x increase from last season. That number is misleading. They were in 20 personnel with 2 backs and 0 tight ends. So still 3 receivers on the field on 24% of their plays. So if you combine the two, they had 3 receivers on the field 69% of the time compared to about 11% of the time last year. On Sunday, the Ravens had 40 snaps with 3 receivers on the field together. Last season, 17 regular season games, they had 152 of those plays. That's so crazy. Fun. Just such a drastic departure from what it was. And you watch those receivers play on Sunday. Okay, I get it.
Dude, there's some juice out there. It's OBJ, by the way, is like blocking his ass off, and it's awesome. Like, it's really cool to see him buy in like that, and just like really, he's trying to dig out safeties at the goal line. I'm like, hell yeah! That's at first I thought it was Bateman because they both wear black tights. So I was like, oh yeah, oh that's OBJ, sweet. And then Bateman looks like he actually looks a lot speedier than I was expecting after coming off the surgery. And Zay Flowers is explosive as all get out. So it's
I'm so pumped, man.
Oh yeah.
I'm so pumped about Zay Flowers.
Oh, they're feeding them too. jet sweeps, screens, third down plays. They're feeding him. He's gonna eat some targets and touches every game. It's a very fun offense. It really is. It's kind of a funhouse mirror offense, but it's really fun.
It wasn't all great. They
No,
only had, I think, 250 total yards. Some of that was short fields, and with the way they were getting the ball back, they were, I think, middle of the road in most efficiency metrics coming out of the game.
yeah,
Areas I'd be concerned. One, the run game didn't look great. And I think part of that is because the run game structurally is just so different than
yeah.
what it's been in years past with all those heavy personnel groupings, that it's going to take a little while for that to all come together. That's not going to be great right away. Even guys that have played together and next to each other, like Kevin Zeitler and Morgan Moses, it still felt like that group overall was sorting through what this offense is going to feel like up front. And I think that extended to the protection. They just weren't very good in pass protection in that game. And notably, they were not very good against the blitz. So
Right.
that's one thing coming out of this game. If we're trying to tie together the Ravens offenses of the past and the Ravens offenses of the present, Lamar was the most blitz non-Falcons starter in the NFL last year. And I say that because the Falcons did not have a real passing game last season. So
Only in my heart.
Among they were a great football team on offense last year. They were very fun to watch, but I don't think people took them seriously in the passing game. So Lamar was really like the most blitzed real quarterback in the NFL last year. And part of that was his performance against the blitz in 2021. He just wasn't very good. On Sunday, only Joe Burrow had a lower EPA per dropback against the blitz than Lamar. And that is going to continue until he shows teams that he can burn them. And I think that this week is going to be an interesting entry into that, because that is something the Bengals have done against him a lot. Over the last two seasons, 21 and 22, Lou Anarumo has used cover zero on 12.9% of Lamar's dropbacks. That's 4 times the league average over that stretch, just for context. The Bengals have blitzed Lamar on 36.4% of his dropbacks, which is higher than all of the other teams on average go after him. So I think that is something that propped up already in week 1 and is definitely something to keep in mind when we're watching these two teams on Sunday.
Especially if Linderbaum's out, their center, because anytime you have a backup center against a blitzing team or a team that can blitz, that's very scary. Lamar can answer a lot of questions, but that's a great, he has to. I mean, that was the whole thing a couple of years ago. Remember what the Dolphins did on Thursday night? And I do think that Monken, even if they have a lot of their retaining staff from Greg Roman, I do think they have some better professional answers to some protection stuff and some blitz stuff. So they also adjusted last week in the second half. They went, they got blitzed twice on third down. They converted both times. They kind of screened it up. So we'll see if they kind of do that as well. Having a little bit more real receiver talent, I think, helps as well. Speed, that's how you kill blitzes, speed, and punish them. So, but they're going to get tested. I mean, they're absolutely going to get tested. He's going to throw blitzes at them because obviously it works against them, especially the ones that Lou Anarumo throws at them.
Last Ravens offense note, and I just wanted this on the record before we moved on. I think the Texans defense is going to be pretty good this year. I thought that they played well on the back end. Tavierre Thomas played well. Steven Nelson had some nice moments. A couple of tough ones from Derek Stingley. He had the pass interference, and then he also had, I think, a rough moment. I can't remember who he was covering. I think it might have been Zay Flowers too. So some reps that were a tiny bit concerning, but overall, their secondary plus the way that their front was playing. Will Anderson is a dude right now.
Yep.
Like, we're 1 week in, he is a dude right now. And you combine that with Hassan Ridgeway played well.
Yeah.
Jonathan Greenard had some good moments. Like, that group, we can already feel that kind of Niners influence seeping in to the defensive front in general. And if the secondary is going to play well, I think that they are going to be at least a feisty defense for a good chunk of this season.
Very feisty. They play with their hair on fire. Like they do from front to back. So it's cool. It was pretty funny though. They sprinkled in, and you can see D'Amico Ryan's kind of just playing with everything, kind of calling a little bit of everything. And he ran cover 2, actually a good deal. And I was like, well, I guess they're used to it. Like, come from the last couple of years, like this unit's kind of like, yeah, we got it. We're good. But then Lamar freaking hit a whole shot to the field to break the cover 2. And it was like, oh yeah, Lamar can do that as well. But it was kind of fun. I kind of had a moment of like humor when I just noticed that they ran cover 2 again, and they ran it a couple times, maybe in honor of Lovie Smith for getting him that high pick.
That was the corner out to Zay Flowers that you're talking about?
It was a switch inside fade.
Okay.
I think it was to Zay Flowers though. Yeah, but it was like an inside fade and then turned into a whole shot. And he just hit it to the field, which is
Yeah,
just
I know exactly the throw that you're talking about. It
that's just
was beautiful, and
that's a middle
I'm
finger to
hoping
any
that we see a
defense.
lot more of those.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the other side of the ball here very quickly. Obviously, the Ravens defense played the Bengals offense very well last year, especially in that playoff game. Their plan for them, which we'll dig into here in a second, I think was very sound and presented some problems that I think can be specific to this Bengals team. But I want to just dig into the week 1 performance from Cincinnati's offense before we talk about the matchup. In your mind, what is real and what is not from that stinker that we saw from the Bengals in week 1?
Obviously, they're not going to have like one of the worst games that we've seen from any offense over the last 2 years. Every week, I think this team will find ways
I
to get
hope not.
yeah, right. But I think the calf injury is a lot more of a thing than I think people are realizing, especially in the rain, especially when you have you're getting pressured under 2 seconds. Your average pressure rate is under 2 seconds. That will really make you feel tentative back there. But you can see Joe Burrow kind of favoring it. Like when he would throw, he would end up on his toe a lot when he was stepping. So just imagine if you're stepping down on your calf, like you put your heel down. Ooh, that's going to bug my calf a little bit. So he's stepping on his toe. So you kind of not committing on some throws. I also just think it was a rough day that some of the Browns had a great game plan, which had some similar philosophy to what this Ravens defense did to the Bengals offense last year, at the end of last year, changing the picture post snap, playing off of tendencies really well, but kind of a very Jim Schwartz way of throwing like some crazy funky coverages and then blitzes as well, like just for the fun of it. Like, yeah, bring everybody playing with their hair on fire. So I think there was a little bit of that calf injury, and it was just a funky game with a really good game plan from Jim Schwartz. But I think the Bengals offense will find some things to break off of this.
Yeah, the rain obviously is not going to be a factor every single week, even though into the playoffs it might be, and the weather might get bad.
Right.
So the fact that this team might not be built for that sort of weather when they had a snow game last year where they were fine. They destroyed the Bills, but I think the weather being a concern, that's not going to happen every single week. You're not going to have a defense that you've never seen before every single week.
Yeah.
Like there was absolutely nothing on tape for what this version of Jim Schwartz's defense looked like. They did a ton of shit that he didn't usually do and that the Browns have never done before. So that's another entry. Even if those are not something you have to be worried about moving forward, I do think the Joe Burrow calf and Joe Burrow health concern is something we probably should have given more credence heading into the season. I wasn't worried about it because they didn't seem worried about it, but week 1, that being the first thing that we've seen, not a great start.
Yeah, he was the changing picture. Usually, like Burrow got a lot better at being efficient, hitting checkdowns, all those things, and not scrambling so much and taking so many shots. And yes, that was improvement. But yesterday or on Sunday, I'm sorry, that felt like out of preservation as opposed to, like, oh, I'm going to, knife you up back here. It's more like, I'm getting rid of the ball. I don't want to create. I don't want to scramble outside structure. The only time you really did that stood out to me, he did a couple times, but it was the 4th down that Myles Garrett blew up the chip help. But why Burrow had to break contain there was Schwartz showed man coverage and they went to cover 2 from it. And Burrow thought he had a read right away and went, oh, shoot. And it was like, okay, I got to break out of it, which you kind of have to do. If you bet wrong and you go to the wrong read, it's like, oh God, creation mode, it's 4th down. But you could just see him not lean into it. But remember that this was where last year, this is when we saw the Bengals' first kind of evolution to go into the gun heavy run game was against the Ravens. So in week 4, week 5, whatever it was. But I think that is such a week 4, such a key thing to remember. This team has done such a good job of adapting. So how do they adapt this time around? It's going to be interesting to watch, though, and keep an eye on.
You mentioned the changing picture. That's exactly what the Ravens did to them, especially in the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
It's nothing crazy.
No.
But they're just sent a lot of simulated pressures at them, and we're changing the way that it looked on the back end. So they only blitzed 4 times in that playoff game. Blitzed.
Quote unquote. Laser.
But there were 11 pass rush snaps combined from Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith in that game. So those guys were mugged up a decent amount, and it was just a matter of figuring out which 4 guys are coming and what are they going to play behind it. Mm-hmm. And the combination of those 2 challenges and those 2 questions gave the Bengals a hell of a hard time in that game. So if they roll out the same strategy, same rubric, same plan here, what is the Bengals' answer when they didn't have one the last time we saw these 2 teams play?
Ooh, I'm actually very curious to see it. I think it's just leading into the run game.
I wasn't asking you. That was
okay. I was like, I don't know. Ask Zach Taylor. But I'm curious to see, and it is interesting. It's always cool to see how the Bengals solve their answers. Sometimes Joe Burrow, sometimes some scheme stuff. So this is a perfect team to see what their new version is. I do say one thing was the Chiefs game, the AFC Championship game, was interesting how they broke some tendencies there. Remember though, like kind of digging up moves, so like Jamar
Yeah.
Chase,
Double moves. Yeah.
yeah, the double moves. So same kind of maybe thinking of like, hey, let's lean into our own tendencies and break them because this team does a pretty good job of it. They're obviously aware of it.
Some personnel stuff for the Ravens defense I thought was worth mentioning. Ronald Darby just was a starter from day one at corner, and then Ardarius Washington was the nickel. So Rock Ya-Sin, who they signed in free agency this offseason, didn't play much in that
Yeah,
game,
was
which
wondering
I
about
thought
that.
was notable. Marcus Williams, pec injury, sounds like he's going to be out for at least, if not all of the season, then a good chunk of time. Geno Stone has played a decent amount of safety for this team over the last couple years. So he'll slot in as that other starting safety with Kyle Hamilton. So that seems to be the way the secondary is going to shake out with Williams gone. I thought some nice flash moments from some of those young pieces up front that we had questions about coming into the season. I thought Odafe Owe had a solid game against the Texans, even though their offensive line is very banged up. And a couple moments from Matabike where it's like, okay, if this can be the norm now moving forward, I don't think they're going to be a dominant front by any stretch. I think they're going to have to rely on the smoke and mirror stuff that we talked about. But I think a good start to the year from some of those young front four pieces that we discussed.
Yep, it's gonna be interesting. Yeah, they're not the Browns D line too, so rest easy, Bengals fans. That's also a nice thing, but they are a pretty solid unit. And also, Roquan Smith is just fantastic. It just like all the messes that he cleans up for that defense. It's just that's always notable too.
He's a very good player, and if you watch that playoff game, he really brings that plan together. Because if you're going to bring Patrick Queen in some of those moments and some of those underneath checkdowns where they're taking advantage of linebackers on other teams because they have to cover an ocean of space in some of those quarters and too high looks, he's eating up all of that space. Some of the tackles he made in space in that game were very, very impressive. That plan comes together because Roquan Smith is so effective in that area of the field.
Absolutely. He's so valuable.
Next one here, Jags and Chiefs. Another playoff rematch from last year. The plan that the Jaguars had for the Chiefs in that playoff game last year, I was wondering what they would do because the first time these two teams played, I think it was in week 10 last season. The Jags did not blitz and they did not play man. It was just a bunch of soft zone, and the Chiefs tore them to shreds. And so in the playoffs, the Jags
said, my son was born, by the way. That's the game I remember when my son was born. That game will always stick in my mind. Isn't that funny?
So they come out in the playoffs and send a ton of heat after Patrick Mahomes and play a decent amount of man. And it kind of worked in the sense that he was uncomfortable and they made him make a lot of plays. Unfortunately, he's capable of making a lot of plays. So I'm wondering, was that game plan a one game, we're going to try to jump on you, playoff specific thing? Or do they think that's their best strategy against a Patrick Mahomes team that really just has Travis Kelce and a bunch of questions at receiver?
I think they lean into it. I don't know. I think the Jaguars team as a whole is very much like live by the sword, died by a sword kind of team. You know, the offense, fourth downs, and just how aggressive they are. But I just think also the defense leans into that as well. This is going to be a big time. This bold statement I'm about to say here. If he plays, but a big time Travis Kelce game, because that was the thing last year was the Jaguars were terrible defending tight ends, terrible. And they like still have the same spine and they still have the same defensive pieces. So I think it's going to be another big Travis Kelce game. And they were not good last week. The Colts tight ends had 5 catches. They got 5 first downs. So that's a pretty good rate, by the way. But I just think that mind meld between Kelce and Mahomes is going to be so key because when he breaks contain, that's his safety net. That's the 5-6 yard gains. I think, didn't he have like 11 catches for like 90 yards? It felt like just like in that game, because that's what it is. He breaks contain when they bring a blitz. The Chiefs offensive line wads it up. He breaks contain. Boom. There's a little 6 yard gain, moves the chains. They didn't have that week 1. And and the other receivers do have to step up, but he has Kelce. So that's the big thing. And they have offensive line health. And so as long as they have that, they're always going to be like, just terrorizing for defenses.
They struggled against tight ends in that game, but otherwise, what were your impressions of the Jags defense 1 week into the year?
I liked the front was like Josh Allen. The front played well, I thought, at least against the run. They made it tough, at least on the Colts. Like there were some spots the Colts could have hit, but then they're playing like Jake Funk.
Colts running numbers were pretty brutal in that game. But
I'm
I
honestly-
do think that the Jags front played very well. Fatu
yeah,
Kasi had a really nice game.
he
I
did.
thought Roy Robertson Harris looks bigger to me than he was last year. I thought he held up against the run a little bit better than he did in stretches last season. And Josh Allen just played like he was shot out of a cannon that entire
Yeah,
game. So
yeah.
I do think that group is going to be interesting over the course of the season. That being said, I think they already miss Arden Key.
Mhm.
K'Lavon Chaisson got 22 snaps in that game for the Jags last week, and he's just not a factor.
Nope.
And if you're going to have that role, which is kind of that move around piece in defined pass rush situations, the same way Arden Key was last year, having that guy go from a truly plus player, which is what Key was for them, to a negative. We knew that coming into the season that they probably needed one more pass rusher, but already 1 week in, it feels like they do.
Absolutely. Arden Key was a God, just a character. I was gonna say a keystone for that defense, and I didn't mean it. I truly didn't mean that like as a pun, and it came out that way. But no, but Arden, what he was doing is because he would put so much pressure when they would run the twists in the games because he's the penetrator. And when you don't, like you said, I always say it the opposite when you go from bad to average. But what if you go from good to bad? That's at least two tiers of a drop in a role that really you need. That was the thing. They lost a lot of pressures. Just all they lost it. It was like that the A's in the Moneyball teams losing runs. Like it's like, where does this come from? How do we rebuild this? And yeah, you can already see it right away. I also think too is that, you know, as far as they are defending the run, the linebackers for the Jags, you can take advantage of play action. They're going to push way far for depth. Even Anthony Richardson in his first start was taking advantage of that. So you might see a lot of check downs and underneath stuff, some play action where that works. And that's happened before. And I think they're going to lean into that as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of side to side action, a lot of stuff to affect the linebackers, because I think that's the way to kind of attack this defense as well.
I do know that Dwan Smoot is probably going to be back at some point this season, but he's coming off a torn Achilles. I don't know when he's going to be back. So as a whole, I think that pass rushing group is just something to keep an eye on. Another thing I'm going to keep an eye on in a good way is what this Trevor Lawrence to Calvin Ridley connection is going to look like this year.
Choo.
Watching the Jags offense last week, and I am bullish on so many things that they're doing, but it was everything I expected in a good and bad way. Trevor Lawrence looked awesome. He made 5 throws in that game that are like, holy shit, there are 3 or 4 people on the planet who can make these throws type of plays in that game. The meld with Calvin Ridley is already promising.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, all of the concerns that we had about the offensive line coming into the season, those are not going away. They got thoroughly outplayed by a Colts front that I would call solid. Yeah, I think it's a solid group. Buckner, we know, is a plus player, but what Grover Stewart and Buckner and even Kwity Paye was doing to that group throughout most of that game is something to monitor moving forward. And guess what? Chris Jones returns for that Chiefs front this week.
Chris Jones returns on a prove-it contract. So How do you think he feels right now? That is exactly it. This Jags offense, for better or for worse, has ways to mitigate some of that. One being Trevor Lawrence is outstanding in the pocket movement. The other is this offense will use a lot of quick hitting offense, RPOs, screens, left and right. Actually, it's an Andy Reid disciple. Like that's what it's going to look like. So it's a lot of side to side, a lot of quick game to Calvin Ridley. I think the one thing I am curious is if they do get to heavy personnel. And I think we talked about this in the pre-show. You mentioned it was like didn't really run the ball that well of the heavy personnel, meaning 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. But I think maybe they did like the Lions did, make the Chiefs match with base. This is the classic Spags way to get after Spags. Make the match with base, spread them out, and then pass the ball. And throw it. And I think
just use Evan Ingram as a slot receiver in those situations. I think that
Ingram and Ridley in the slots. Yep. Just how I'm on Ross St. Brown guy. It's on tape. You can go, oh, that's a good idea. Like, you can actually just use that and carry it over. And something they've done before. So I do think that Leo Chanel provides a lot more against the run than other linebackers have in this Chiefs defense when he's on the field. But against the pass is not his strength. So that's the thing you have to take advantage of when you get him into that.
Even when the Jags offensive line was healthy last week, I thought that they were not playing very well. And now Brandon Scherf and their center, Luke Fortner, both are not practicing right now and are probably questions to play in this game. Again, where Chris Jones will be present.
Where does he line up? Where does he go against? Yeah, that's pretty scary. That's maybe a lot of movement throws. Let's get Trevor on the move. I think that'll keep him alive a little bit.
The comeback that he threw on time while moving in the pocket on Sunday, I don't even know what to say about that. That guy can really sling it. It's so fun to watch him play free and loose in the way that he has over the last season and a half, because that was one of my concerns after watching him even early on last season. I can't remember which game it was, but we were talking about this and he looked so robotic and the ways that he was operating in the pocket. And I'm just like, just let your shoulders down, man. Yeah. Like, you're so hyper talented. Like, you don't have to be that stiff in the pocket. And how twitchy and free and loose he's now playing the position. And I think it really did start in that Ravens game. Yeah. It is so encouraging because it has truly unlocked all of those physical gifts that he has.
Yeah, it was definitely the Ravens game, which is funny because the week before, it was the week before. What was it? Yeah, no, 2 weeks before they played the Chiefs, and then they went to the bye week, and then they played the Ravens, and they came out of it. So it was really that bye week. Then they had a stinker against the Lions. Remember, he got hurt in the 2-minute drill, and
I thought he snapped his leg in half, and then he came back in the game.
Yeah, he was fine. I know, because he's a good athlete. And then the next week against the Titans, it was like, he was calling his own number. He scored a touchdown. Yeah. And ever since then, he's really just remembered like, oh yeah, I'm a guy that's considered generational, but now he has this guy that he trusts. And it's so cool, the stuff that they're doing, the timing that they're playing with. And Ridley is such a good route runner, guys. So good. Like, he's top 5 to me. And him and Lawrence together with his timing, it's exquisite. It's such good football. And this might be ugly at some point because of the offensive line, but the thing between those two, what they have right now, is really, really special.
And I'm probably screaming at their phones right now, being like, well, then why didn't they just run up and down the field on the Colts last week? 2 things. They couldn't protect. The offensive line was outmatched. They did not run the ball efficiently, and untimely turnovers. I mean, that pick that Trevor Lawrence threw is maddening. It hits Tank Bigsby in the hands.
And you see his pocket movement on it too. He's like avoiding two sacks.
It was a great play, and for it to end like that is just heartbreaking. So I think overall, I feel very good about Press Taylor is actually the play caller now, but the offensive coaching brain trust and the quarterback to make this a very good offense over the course of the year. But the weaknesses, I think, were already on display in week 1, and they're worth monitoring against this Chiefs team on Sunday.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get to the matchup of the week. This segment is sponsored by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. We get the Miami Dolphins red hot offense going against the Patriots defense on Sunday. I mean, the Dolphins were an absolute machine last week, but the Patriots defense gave that Colts offense a headache over the course of that game. And that Patriots defense, I think, is as advertised in a bunch of different ways. What is the aspect of this matchup that you were most excited to watch on Sunday?
As always, when you see an awesome defensive mind against a really good offense, what's the plan? What do you lean into? What's your gimmick this week, or do you lean into your fastball? This Patriots team last year that we've touched on that played a little bit differently than Belichick defenses in the past, a little bit more too high, a little bit more cover 2 quarters, all these little bit less blitzing. And then when week 1 against the Eagles, it was like, it's still a Belichick defense. It was all man, all cover 3, all cover 0. Those were the same 3 pitches. And it was so cool to see this Patriots defense that has so much team speed, way more than they ever had before. And they're going against a Dolphins team that has the speediest of team speed, period. Just really cool kind of styles make fights thing. But I just want to talk about this Patriots defense real quick, is that they have the size up front, but the DB room is so deep and has so many different pieces. We think of that usually. How many guys
do you think played for the Patriots defense last week?
I actually know. They played 8 DBs and a rookie who's listed as a linebacker / DB, Marte Mapu. Also played. So that's like 8.5, I guess. 8.5 DBs played.
20 guys played 9 snaps for the Patriots on defense last week. 20. 9 snaps. 18 guys played at least 10 snaps for the Patriots on Sunday.
And they're playing the Eagles offense. It wasn't like just some joke game. It's like, no, this is a game you got to lock in.
Trying to keep track of who's on the field and where they're playing in this group is very difficult. You have to watch every single play 3 times to understand who's actually out there.
The two DBs that played every snap were Duggar and Christian Gonzalez. So my guy Duggar, but then Christian Gonzalez as well, who had some had a couple moments of good and bad, but he provides an element in that DB room that they didn't have before.
So the plan, I think, is the number one question I would have. Do they play a lot of man? Do they not? So when these two teams played last year, when Tua was healthy, they played about 50% man on third down. But I believe that was the opening game of the season. It was before we knew what the Dolphins offense was. So we actually haven't seen the Patriots plan for a Tua Dolphins offense since they became the unit that we've come to know. So I don't really have a sense of what they're going to do. So that would be my number one question. But then if you look at it up front and in the back end, the Patriots defense is a ridiculous mismatch for this Dolphins offensive line. The way that group played on Sunday, we already knew that they were good last year. Okay. You have that group where it's Christian Barmore, Dietrich Wise, and then when they're in pass rush situations, you have Judon and Josh Uche, and it all kind of comes together in a way that makes sense. It's a good combination. I was high on that group as composed in 2022. Then you drop Keon White into this situation.
Dude,
that guy looks ridiculous.
He was bull rushing like a monster against the Eagles. He is great.
By a lot of ways, like 350. And he was putting him in Jalen Hurts' lap multiple times in this game.
And Uche got Lane Johnson like several times. Like I'm telling you, this team has so much speed. You had him what, third? I think
I had him third in our top defenses.
Yeah. That's what it looked like. That looked like a top 3 defense against an offense that usually has a lot of answers. And just one thing, like also just, the size up front, the just different pieces on the back end. Also, the other thing is just like with Schwartz in the Browns is, does Belichick lean into some spot drop, which is the classic zone coverage. You talked about offenses, how they looked back in 2000. That's where we're at right now. Let's bring back some 2000 coverages, baby. The boomers are bringing it back, but it's great because they drop these guys. They keep eyes on the quarterback. There's not as much against the Eagles offense. I think it was a great way to, it wasn't all the time. It was like a half dozen snaps. It was a great way to take away maybe some back shoulder throws and some other stuff underneath, any kind of switch release stuff. And it'll be interesting if they lean into that a little bit against the Dolphins.
Do you think that's a good plan against the Dolphins? So we're contrasting spot drop zone with pattern match zone. So a lot of the zone coverage that's played in the NFL over the last decade or so, you match routes. So it eventually turns into man at a certain point. Spot drop zone, you're not doing that. You're truly dropping into a zone and having your eyes on the quarterback. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like that would be a decent plan against Miami because all of the motions that they're using are designed, one, to hide guys and to create leverage, but two, to change the number counts right before the snap of the ball. And the number counts dictate how you match those patterns. So if you're playing spot drop zone, you don't necessarily need to worry about that. So against a team that's using all this quick motion, I feel like it actually would be a reasonable change up.
It's all the rules of the last 5-6 years that offenses have adapted: the jet motion, the speed motion, the 4 strong concepts where 4 guys are going to one field. That's all to beat match. That's all to go. That's all to make defenders' brains break and go, who's number 3? Who's number 2? Oh, shit. Oh, there you go. Oh, God, there's a guy 20 yards downfield. Like, that's what it's been designed to do. And now it's just guys hanging out. It's just guys running straight to the sideline with their eyes at the quarterback. And it's just such a jarring thing to see teams do it a little bit more often. So I do think I like how you're saying that. I do think that they might lean into it just to like avoid. It's a change up. It's not something you truly lean into, but it's just to make the defense's life easier because you don't have to worry about the number count, and just maybe you trick the quarterback into going, oh shoot, what is that? And maybe make them make a mistake.
I wonder if you go back and watch some of the stuff that the Ravens were doing. I don't know this for a fact, but some of those coverages they were playing behind those simulated pressure against the Bengals, I think there was there some spot drop stuff in there as well?
Yep.
Cover 2. Yeah. It feels like there might have been.
The general stimulated coverage is cover 2 because that can trap quarterbacks. Yep. I've been hot, and then you just have a guy standing there. So, but I think they did do some cover 3 as well. I think, just memory at least.
Because I know they're a team I think that's been conscious of how do we make sure that our change-ups to this pattern match stuff keeps offenses off balance. And I think so I wouldn't be surprised if they were a team that would lean into it a little bit. So we mentioned, I think up front, the Dolphins are at a disadvantage against this Patriots front, which I think is going to be up there with the best in the league the entire season based on the personnel that they have. On the back end, you mentioned Christian Gonzalez had some mixed moments in his first start. It's his first start. And now in his second start, he's playing against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Even if I'm bullish on this Patriots defense and the way they played last week, this is a different sort of challenge for that young DB room, even than the one they saw against the Eagles.
Yeah, just like we said in the top 10 show, there's so many good offenses this year, and they provide and there's so many different ways. Think of how, like, first off, I wish a reporter could ask Belichick, like, have you seen that kind of speed out motion before? Because I'm curious if you talked about the flex bone at all, because that's what it was similar to. But also, like he's like, oh, back in Navy, the Naval Academy when we were running it, like I wanted an answer like that.
You have this thing, it's called Slack. And if you want to send Chad Graff a message and say, Chad, in the next Belichick
Oh,
press
that's a good
conference, you
call.
should ask him if he's ever seen this speed motion before. This is a
That's
thing
a
that's
good call.
available to you.
I know. As anyone that's worked with me knows how my Slack Slack experience is, but also it's Tua does get the ball out quickly, which is this Patriots defense is thrives on if you hold the ball and compress the pocket. So that's another thing too. Is like, yeah, they have answers even if the offense just falls apart. But
I
I'm
don't
just
know,
curious.
man. That's the old version of the Patriots pass rush. Josh Uche is not a pocket pusher. He's
Oh my
winning in like
goodness,
less than 2 seconds.
and Keon White's winning less than 2 seconds. But also just like, isn't it cool just to like the Dolphins are going to be like 21 personnel with a fullback, and it's so different than like there's like 5 teams using fullbacks, but they all are so different how they use them. It's pretty cool. Like Alec Ingold is used way differently than how the Raiders use their fullback and how the Falcons are using their guy and how Juszczyk is used with the 49ers. So it's kind of cool. Also, like it's something funny with the Dolphins, just like how they get defenses in bad spots.
One other thing to mention about the Dolphins offense before we move on. Sounds like Teron Armstead is going to play. He's been limited in practice, but he had the non-contact jersey off. So that is a good thing for Miami's offense. All right. It is time now for Maze's Multi-View, sponsored by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. For those of you who remember our fourth screen segment from last year, this is the same idea. I'm going to admit this. I forgot to solicit emails from readers to do this segment this week, but I should have known that I can count on you guys. We already got a couple of them. We still got a couple of them, including this gem from Donnie. Okay. Donnie starts with, he knows the segment. He knows what's going on here. He starts with caveat. I know this is technically the 3 p.m. window, but let me cook. He says, are you a sicko? The kind of person who finds themselves watching meaningless Big Ten games in November between Purdue and Northwestern? Then allow me to introduce you to Giants Cardinals. Josh Dobbs versus Dan Jones. On one side, we have Arizona, whose coach might be doing an I think you should leave bit and is voluntarily putting out the least inspiring pregame speeches on Al Gore's internet. This man said pew, pew, pew to another adult that he works with. We cannot forget this. On the other side, we have $40 million a year Dan Jones. It probably won't be as bad as Sunday night, probably, but we are getting the full experience of what it's like to pay the most average quarterback the market rate. Saying they're stuck in the mud offensively does a disservice to being stuck in the mud. We got NPCs running routes mixed in with some Saquon smashing his face into the teeth of the defense. This game is a chance to produce some of the funniest plays of the weekend. Is Wink going to engage 8 on the first play of the game? Feels like a non-zero chance we get a butt fumble. No matter what, it will be a truly gross football game. But if you're still reading this, we've established you're a sicko. So sit back, maybe bet the over if you want to feel like you're getting punched in the face over and over, and enjoy it in all its filthy glory. You asked for unhinged. I did my best, Donnie.
God,
just
Thank
well
you.
done, Donnie. Well done. Well done. So we can't put it as the fourth screen in the noon games, but I'll have this on a TV. Maybe it'll have its own screen in honor to Donnie and the work that he did. So we'll figure out how that ends up sorting out. But an excellent fourth screen email in a week where I forgot to ask for them. So really appreciate you guys coming through.
Thank you for saving us. Fantastic. Fantastic as always.
We want to start doing something on this show where we just spend a little bit of time focusing on a single player, and whether it be the last game that player had or how that guy has played this season. And as a throwback and as an homage to one of the first series I ever did in this business, when I did the all 22 All-Stars for Grantland, we're going to call it the all 22 All-Stars. We're going to pick an all 22 All-Star of the week and just focus in on that performance that guy had. And this week it is going to be Patrick Surtain from the Denver Broncos and the game that he had against Davante Adams. I'm going to let you cook here. You were very excited to talk about this. Walk me through the game that Patrick Surtain had last week against the Raiders.
It's just the best watching like a true, Goliath battle, a kaiju battle on the outside, especially between like a true blue elite corner and a true number one receiver. So Davante Adams was targeted 6 times when Patrick Surtain was in true coverage on him. I watched every single snap. So it was some man, but some zone coverage where it ends up being man coverage on the outside. But anyways, Adam had two receptions, one of 8 yards, one of 3 yards, neither going for a first down, and also drew a DPI, defensive pass interference on Surtain. The other 3 targets, all passes broken up by Surtain. And all were like different flavors. There was like a downfield throw and like a flea flicker where he was just gloved up. And honestly, it could have been picked if Devontae Adams just like tackled him. A quick hitter from the slot, like it was really cool. It was like Devontae had just like a perfect little slant route, how he sold it. And Surtain recovered and just got his hands on it. And then also another one in the end zone.
It was a little wide too. He had to reach for it. And I think that was part of the reason too.
Oh yeah. Oh, the throw. Yes, that helps too. Yeah. It does. But that's the thing. It's like, Adams usually takes advantage no matter what. So it's kind of cool to see someone just in his hip pocket. And
for the throw to have to be perfect says a lot about the guy covering him, because it often doesn't because of how open he is.
But you can also just tell the influence Surtain has on the game because of who else got targeted. Jacoby Myers had a great day. And Damari Mathis, who's the other Broncos.
Damari Mathis, man.
Rough day.
Single time. I felt so bad for him. The one time Devontae was on him, they were in cover 3, and he just ran like a comeback. He was open by 10 yards because Damari Mathis was so scared.
He had no chance. And I think it was only like 3 or 4 times that I remember like real reps where Devontae wasn't covered by Surtain, and he got like three of his catches just came right there. It was just like right away. It was like, oh, of course. But Mathis got targeted 6 times, about 6 receptions, 71 yards. And
I think it was more than that. I think PFF credited him with like 9 targets in that game.
Probably some zone stuff. Oh, it was rough for him. And no worries. They just play Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson next week or this week. And then next week they play Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But one thing is for certain is whoever Surtain is guarding is going to get their handful. Like it's going to be a handful the entire day, no matter what they run. He is like one of the best, not just defenders in the league, like truly, but just like one of the best players. Like he is amazing. And that's the fact that this was against an elite guy that he's playing like this. Now imagine after the next couple of weeks, when he plays maybe some schlups as the season goes along. Fantastic player. This is an all-pro last year. I understand that, but I just want to emphasize how good of Surtain is.
It was a great matchup. And the fact that we get it twice a year while he's with the Raiders is awesome. And it's so cool you watch a player in college and you think, all right, I think I know what this guy is. And then he comes into the NFL and like, oh, he's exactly that. And what was so cool about Surtain as a prospect is that he was just never sped up. He was always in control. Every single snap, he just looked like a robot. And you combine that with truly exceptional physical skills. And then he comes into the NFL and he starts playing against Devontae Adams in one-on-one situations. And that's exactly who he is. He is never, ever out of sorts in coverage. And you combine that with an elite physical skill set. He is a fun player to watch.
Yeah, he's special. Truly special player.
All right, we are finishing this show each week with a few picks from our guy over here. We're calling this Tice's Touts, your favorite picks of the week. What have you got for me this week?
I believe I went 2-2 last week because I couldn't help myself. I had to throw a 4th in, but I'm glad I did because it was the Cowboys. So I am pretty happy about that one. This week, I am actually some relevant teams to the news cycle. I'm going with the Jets +9. The Jets +9 over the Cowboys. I just think it's because it's 2 elite defenses that are going to keep this a little tighter. I think some of it's overblown. I mean, just watch how this team played. Yes, Zach Wilson is very not good, but they have a little bit more time to prep. We'll see. I think they keep it close just because these defenses are so good, and the Jets are like really trying to keep the faith. And it's only week 2. They haven't been demoralized or anything too much yet. But also
we will talk about that game on the Sunday night recap. We did not talk about the Cowboys really at all this week. We will definitely touch on Jets Cowboys and how that Dallas offense specifically played against the Jets. We'll hit on that on Sunday night this week.
Absolutely. Okay, on to the next one. So I just think it's more keep it close and we get a little ugly there and just figure it out.
9 points with that Jets defense being involved in the game is a lot of points.
That's it.
I completely understand that.
That's exactly my angle. That's really it. It comes down to that. I just took 200 more words to get there. So now the next one, I have this in parentheses, just saying, I'm going Broncos -3.5 against those Washington Commanders. I actually liked what the Broncos were doing on offense. Peyton's got he's narrowing it down for Russ. And I think it's
weird game.
Game.
The final score was 17-16. And then you look at the efficiency numbers and they were 2 of the best offenses in the league last week on a per play basis.
Just marched on each other. The film is actually like really pleasant to watch. I actually kind of like the Raiders' little bully ball that they're doing. It's really,
It was
it's
funny because
hilarious.
now the all 22 has 3 angles, so
Yeah,
the tape is longer, but
yeah.
the Raiders offensive tape was still only 40 minutes long.
It's so short. I know the file downloaded like it was nothing. It was great. No, but I think that Broncos team, that was just, it's a funky matchup. The Raiders are going to they're going to draw you into the muck, into a 17-16 games. They're going against Sam Howell, who had an up and down performance to start out. Who knows how this Washington offense is figuring their things out. They have Broncos got a good defense. Like all of a sudden I see Randy Gregory out there. I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. Like, yeah, he's playing. Yeah, there he is. So on the flip side, we'll see how I think this Broncos offense is at least fine. That it was solid. It looked like, okay, I could see this working out. Going against a really good Commanders defense, but I just think that this Broncos team at home will take care of business. A lot of words there. I'm sorry, guys. Bring us home. Got to shout out the Bears here, but going on the other side, I'm going Bucks -2.5 over the Bears at home. I just watched this. Todd Bowles.
You just tried to tell me earlier in this show that the Bears' dream is
cover.
not dead, and
They
now
can
you are picking them to lose to a Bucks team that we spent 10 minutes talking about in the preseason.
This is called an emotional
Pick a
hedge,
side.
my friends. Emotional hedge. No, but they could. You got 17. You got 17 games. Maybe not week 2. The Todd Bowles against that Vikings. Okay, a really fun blitzing defense, like a really exotic one that is psycho at defensive coordinator, and they have good pieces, is one of the most fun things to watch in football, unless you're on the offense. Watching one of those defensive coordinators going against a protection that they don't respect is peak football. And watching Todd Bowles against that Vikings offensive line and pass protection and just going like, I'm going to call this one. I'm going to try this one on for size. And now he's going against the Bears. That's it. That's it. And I don't care about Baker. I think the Bucs offense is going to have some weird moments and be just overall weird, but they have this defense. And I just think that they'll take care of business at home.
I'm so scared. I'm so scared.
Dude, like, it's like, oh yeah, Vita Vea just destroyed the Vikings offensive line. Just like they couldn't even block him. And now he's playing against the Bears interior.
Bowles has got to be licking his chops after watching literally the last season and a half of Bears football, but particularly last week. I'm not looking forward to what Sunday could rot. All right, that's all we got. As always, guys, sincerely appreciate you listening. We'll do this every single week, obviously previewing each week. It's going to be a fun show. Really looking forward to it. If you're listening to this before the Thursday night game starts, we are doing our live recap of Vikings Eagles on our YouTube channel. If you're listening on Friday morning, the video will be available, so you can check it out there. We're doing our Thursday night recaps all throughout the season, so continue to check those out. For now, that's all we got. Please come back and join us on Sunday. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you soon.